Welcome. My name is Joe Swimmer. I'm the Executive Director of Episcopal Parish Network, and we are so pleased to have you with us this Monday. Happy Monday to everyone, and to whatever day it is when you watch this, if you are watching it in the recording. We are glad to share today about space rental and some things that you as a parish or cathedral might want to be keeping in mind as you rent space on your campus. And for that purpose, we are pleased to be joined by our friends from Cool Solutions, who help advise on this regularly, and be led by, moderated by Jim Lamb, who helps to run our parish administrators group, which we invite you to be in touch with us at info@episcopalparishes.org if you are not a member of and are a parish administrator and would like to join. Jim at St. David's in Austin, they have quite a few different rentals that they do, and so he will be adding his wisdom to the collective group. A couple of housekeeping notes. We would ask that you please enter your name and where you are dialing in from into the chat. Also, please use the chat and not the Q&A. Please use the chat and not the Q&A for your questions and comments. The panel will get to them as applicable during the session. And finally, a couple of reminders. If you are not a member of EPN, we invite you to learn more by reaching out to us at info@episcopalparishes.org, info@episcopalparishes.org. And please join us in Houston for our 39th annual conference coming up March 6th through 9th of next year, which we have a lot of great information about at our website, episcopalparishes.org. So that's a lot for me. Sorry for the long introduction, but I'm excited to have this group in conversation. And I am now going to hand it off to Jim. Jim, thanks so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Joe. Good to have you all here on this webinar. I'll let them introduce themselves. Lee Cool is on the line, as Joe said, and Kim Simmons. And so why don't you go ahead, Lee and Kim, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then we'll go ahead and kick off the webinar.
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Lee Cool. You won't be hearing too much of me on the presentation today, but I will be hanging out in the chat box, answering questions as they come in. Kim here is the real star of the show, so I'll let her introduce herself.
Hey everybody, I'm Kim Simmons with Cool Solutions. I am customer stewardship lead here, but have been with the team for about a year and a half now. But I came out of a large 5-campus church where I managed events for about 8 years. So I've got a lot of experience and background, and hopefully I can share some of what I've learned with y'all today.
Great, thank you very much. Again, if you have questions as we progress, feel free to put them in the chat, not the Q&A, just the chat. And Kim and Lee or myself will be happy to answer those as you post them. We'll be monitoring them as they talk. So please feel free to do that. And we'll proceed. Kim, why don't you start us? Oh, let me introduce myself. I'm sorry. I'm Jim Lamb. I'm the parish administrator at St. David's Episcopal Church in downtown Austin. And as Joe said, we're a fairly large church for Episcopal churches, definitely the biggest in Austin as far as Episcopal. And we do a lot because we're downtown. We do a lot of events, everything from South by Southwest, which many of you may know is the huge musical festival here in Austin. We also host, we're one of the many that host that group. We also are one of the site hosts for Austin Film Festival that just happened this past fall, and Texas Tribune, which is a speaker series that they hold in our church as well as a ton of other things. We have Candlelight Music series is here at least once or twice a month, and a myriad of other things that happen because we try to stay engaged in the community. So that's my take on it. And again, like Joe said, I invite all the administrators, if you're on the call, to join our group through EPN, and you can contact EPN through the website to get on that group if you're not on there already. With that, I will hand it over to Kim and let her do what she does best.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jim. I'm excited to have an opportunity to share this information with everyone. As I said during my introduction, I actually used to work at a large 5-campus church in the Chicago suburbs who, we did everything from the super huge large concert events to, the everyday little bitty events that happen all day long. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Prior to that, I'll actually even share that I ran both a district as well as a scout district, as well as a scout troop and pack. So I'm very familiar with church rental from the other side as being the renter. So hopefully a lot of the information I have will be helpful to you. So today we're going to talk about impactful church events. And the first thing I want you to know is every church event, from the smallest of meetings to the largest of activities with many, many, many attendees, all have the opportunity to be impactful. And so that's the first kind of big thing I want to drive home. Every opportunity you have to have someone in your church facility is an impactful opportunity. So keep that in mind as we go through these items we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about an event. It's pretty simple. An event is a planned occasion. It's going to bring people together for a purpose. It can be a meeting, a celebration, an activity, and everything in between there. The end of the day, if you've planned it and you have a purpose behind it, it's an event. Usually our events have a set date, time, location, agenda. We know what we want to accomplish, when we want to accomplish it, where we're going to hold it. We also want to make sure events should be within the context of your church mission and values. And when I say that, that does not mean every event is a church-sponsored event. That can be events that bring the community into your facility. It can be an outreach type of event, an opportunity to get people familiar with who you are and what your mission and values are. But if you kind of keep that in mind, what is the context of our event? Does it meet with our mission and our values? So when we start our events, we've got the top 5 things that we almost always do, and they're not the right things. So just for fun, let's talk about those. What we usually do first, well, we come up with a really fun, catchy name. You got to have a catchy name for every event. And then when we're done with that, we talk about the swag. What are we going to give away? Are we giving away shirts, hats, tickets? What are we giving away for this event? And then always, and sometimes this might be number 2, food and drink. And, particularly for men's events, I know, bacon is always a discussion point. So food and drink might rise up to number 2, depending on that event. What's the decor? What's the ambiance? Are we going to have music? These are the things we talk about when we start planning an event. And are we going to have speakers? Is there someone that's going to come in and give a message? I suppose it could be, are we going to have speakers for the music? The ones with the noise, but it's really more about who's going to deliver a message. Those are the things we almost always do first, but they're not the right things. The things we need to start with, we need a goal. What's the goal of the event? Now, if this event is a meeting, that's probably going to be a pretty simple goal, but you still have one. So it's important to state that everyone who's a participant understands what the goal is. And then you need a budget, because everything, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a bit, everything has a cost. So there needs to be a budget for every event. Who's the audience? What's the venue? Do we want a nice, quiet venue or, ambiance for this group? Do we need it big and loud and lots of seating? You need to identify that. You need a timeline and you need a schedule. And when I say a timeline, I don't mean an event date. That's a one-time day. You need a schedule leading into that day and coming out of that day, because your timeline for your events is not a 1 day or 2 day activity. It is weeks or months prior to those days and probably weeks after those days, depending on the event size. And finally, you need a plan. How are we going to communicate it? How are we going to promote it? How are we going to talk about this? So these are the things that we're going to talk about today, because that's where we should be spending our time when we first kick off our event planning. Before we talk about those 5 areas, I wanted to talk about common event pitfalls. If you do any research, you're going to find these items are listed for any event, not just church events, all events. These are the most common pitfalls when you talk about event planning. And those top 3 that I've grouped together: lack of a clear purpose, overcomplicated programs, ignoring feedback or lack of follow-up. And we're going to talk a bit more about that one. That can be managed by stating a goal. You know what your goal is. Always go back to the goal. You start to build a plan for your event. Maybe it's multi-day, maybe there's multi-parts, it's feeling complicated. Oh, let's go back to the goal. Are those things meeting the goal? Are they going to get us there? If they're not, let's think about those. Of course, budget mismanagement. We're going to manage that through establishing a budget. A few things here. Accessibility. You know, this is something we need to think about for all of our events. Do we need to make sure it's accessible to all folks? Do we need to consider things like closed captioning, sign language? Do I need interpreters? What are some things that I need? Am I asking for the community to get involved? If I'm ignoring the community and I'm having a big event, you're missing a huge opportunity. And then there's safety components. You know, it's a lot of fun to have a lot of people for a concert in a facility with a lot of haze and a light shows. But if you haven't thought about how you're going to get them out, if the worst thing happens, or how you're going to lock them down, then you've done a disservice in your planning. So by identifying your audience and your venue early on, you can avoid those 3 pitfalls. Of course, we've got inadequate planning, poor timing. What else is happening? Now, if this is a church event, you need to look at what else is on your church calendar. Maybe if it's a church event, you need to look at what's happening in your community. Are you planning a parent, some type of a thing for your parents of your students, but it's going to fall during spring break? Probably not the best timing. So you need to have a larger picture of what's happening for the audience, back up here, for the audience that you're targeting. Ineffective volunteer coordination. My number 1 pet peeve was having volunteers show up for events and they didn't know what to do. There is not a worse way to tell people that you don't value their time than by not giving them something to do when they take those steps to show up. And failing to adapt. What does that mean? Is this an event you do year after year? Do you do it because you've always been doing it? Do you do it because you meet the goal and you have success year after year? Are you taking feedback from each year and then using that feedback to change and grow your events and activities? Well, you're going to do all that through a timeline and schedule. Of course, the limited promotion pitfall, that is all going to be about communication and promotion. Now, in some of these, you are going to be the sole person who works in all of these areas. In others, depending on what the activity or event is, it might be a community organization that you're working with to get that information. It also could be, you know, in the case maybe of a concert. I know I've done plenty of concerts and you're working with a management company. So you've gotta look at how those teams that you're partnering with play a part in each of these 5 areas that will keep you from hitting some of these pitfalls. I'm going to do a quick pause. I see a few things in chat. I just want to kind of take a look at those. Any questions?
Kim, I see that Megan Cochran, you have your hand raised. I don't know if you have a question or not, but if you could put your question in the chat, that'd be great. Or if you just clicked it by accident, that's fine too. Thank you.
Perfect. And I'm just going to periodically pause and open up the chat window. I'm not looking at it while I'm going through the presentation because I get distracted easily.
Yeah, I don't see any questions right now.
Okay.
Just people are logging in their name and where they're from, that type of thing. So
perfect.
I'll keep monitoring it for you.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
All right. Well, we're going to go to the next part and we're going to break down each of those 5 top items that we need to focus on. Stating the goal. And we've all heard this. We need to set goals, whether it's for ourselves, for our organizations, but it also applies for our events. We need to set those clear, achievable goals. What's the purpose? Is it measurable? How do I know if I was successful in reaching the goal? So knowing what you want to accomplish or what the output is crucial to understanding the success of the event. Think about that. That is so important. If you do the same events year after year after year, and you're doing them because you've always done them, are they successful? And those can be difficult things to look at, particularly when we're talking about our church events. Why do we keep doing it? Are we getting what we are expecting out of it? So you've got to know what the goal is to know if you can measure success. I always like to mention SMART goals. You've probably all heard the acronym SMART, but in case you haven't, specific, measurable, attainable. If you put a goal that's so far out there that it is just not attainable, well, you can guess that you're not going to meet it. Is it relevant? And there's 2 T's. Some people say trackable, some say time-bound. I lean towards trackable because I've been using SMART longer, and I think they changed it recently. But that is the acronym that I always use when I'm thinking about goals. The other thing you need to do during goal planning is review survey information from previous sessions. And we don't always do this. So you can guess that one of the things we're going to talk about towards the end is asking for feedback. And feedback can be 2 things, right? Feedback can be just noise that's coming through a speaker, right? But I prefer to think of feedback as a gift. Now, what I do with the gift is going to be up to me. I can unwrap it. I can try it on. I can look at it. I can incorporate some of it, or I can regift it, or I can return it. I think feedback is a gift, and it's for you to use in ways that meet your goals. So if you have previous information, by all means, dust it off and take a look at it before you start planning the next version. Budgets, it's everyone's favorite topic. We all have to manage budgets, and every event has a cost. The meeting with 5 people has a cost to your facility. The big concert event with the management company who's giving you X dollars to be there still has a cost. And so without that budget, you will not know, have I considered all the costs? And when I say that meeting with 5 people, you're thinking, nah, we have the room, we have the chairs, everything's good. Well, you're turning on the lights. It might only be for an hour, but there's a cost for that. Maybe you have to have somebody in the building during that time. There's a salary cost there. Are you running HVAC? Depending on where you are, it's hot, it's cold. You might be doing, having to run HVAC. There's a cost. So from the very simple things to the very large things with events, there is a cost. If you have a scout group, that's what I was familiar with in the church. You might think, well, we're giving back. We're hosting them. We want to give back, and that's great. And if you are willing to do that as part of your kind of outreach to community, that's awesome. But you still should know what the cost is for you. And that's more than, lights and HVAC. It's wear and tear in your facility. It's paper goods in restrooms and in kitchens and in all the places. So there's a cost associated with even the outreach type things where you don't want to charge those costs back. It's okay that you don't want to charge those costs back if that's part of your mission and values, but you still should understand what those costs are so that you understand what that's doing to your budget. You got to think about your guests. Is there going to be a cost for them? Is there a registration fee with this event? Is there food and drink available? Is there food and drink for purchase available? Are there going to be on-site or pre-order sales? Can you get a t-shirt, a coffee mug, a book? Are there things like that? Knowing what those costs can be for your guests is going to be super important, because you're going to want to include that in your communication plan. And then think of those costs and now think, can we defer them? Can we reduce them? Are there donations we can ask for? Now, I am not and will not pretend to be a tax expert. So I will just tell you, if you are going the route of donations, deferred costs, whatever, just make sure with whoever your accounting people are that that's the right thing to do. I don't want to get into that discussion because I am not an expert there, but there's always a way to reduce costs. Okay, I saw quite a few things go up in the chat. I'm just going to take a quick look here.
It was just asking if this is being recorded, and it is.
Perfect.
Those who registered for this will have a link sent to them. Otherwise, you can always go on the EPN website, episcopalparishes.org, and they're there as well.
Perfect. Now, by checking those chats, it gives me a moment to take a sip of my drink and reset. So we're going to move on and talk about identifying our audience and our venue. Another key area. So this is the W's. Who is the event serving? Church members? The general public? What do you want them to get out of the event? Where will they be comfortable? Not where will you be comfortable, where will they be comfortable? Do we need accessibility needs? Are there safety considerations? Those are questions you need to ask yourself based off your audience. When are they available? I'm not going to have a student event in the middle of the day during the school year. Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Unless, of course, it's one of those local holidays that you might have where parents are desperate to find a place for their kids. Maybe then it makes sense. Why would they attend? That is a great question. When you do the who, what, where, when, why, when you get to why, really ask yourselves, why would people attend this event? What about this event appeals to them that makes them want to attend? And then we're going to create a timeline and a schedule. So when does the timeline begin? Well, it pretty much begins at infancy during the planning stage. Your budget planning, you may do calendar planning in your organization. You may have communication and promotion deadlines. Everyone operates a little bit differently there, but whether you're doing that today for your next ministry year or the next 6 months of ministry, that's when your timeline begins. You also need to think about setup. When you have an event that needs setup time, what does that look like? Do I need to go into a room and set up a couple tables and 10 chairs? Well, yes, I want to arrange for that and I want to make sure it happens. But if I'm having a wedding, I can't do that at the last minute. I need to schedule that maybe the day before. So when you think about setup in your timeline, you have to think about the interruption that could happen to other needs, other ministry, because you're blocking space or spaces for that setup activity that needs to happen. Well, and then you have the actual event, right? And that's what we all think about as the timeline, the actual event, start and end. But it's not done when the event is done. As we all know, there's cleanup, there's tear down, there's things that have to happen immediately following the event. And that might be you, your teams, your volunteer teams, facility teams, other groups. But even when you tear down an event, you need to look ahead. So what's happening tomorrow in that same space? If you have a concert on a Saturday night and you have worship on Sunday morning, you may have a problem because you've got to, flip that, clean that, and get it ready. So you need to think about that tear down time that's needed and that cleanup time. But the timeline's still not done. You need to do a post-event evaluation. Now, maybe you're not going to send surveys out to attendees and ask for their input, or maybe you collected some, manual surveys at the event or activity. So you need the time to gather that information and look at it as a planning team. So until you've done that, your timeline is still ticking away. Because if all you're going to do is collect surveys, get information, and then sit on it, you're not going to do anything till next year. You really have done yourself a disservice. You want to do that post-event evaluation while it's all fresh. We have the high feeling, the endorphins get crazy during the event. And then everything comes down. We're tired. We're cleaning up. We're flipping rooms. We're doing all the things. But we want to make sure we have a pause a week or two later to say, okay, let's do a post-event evaluation. How did it go? Were there any pain points? What did we learn? What were people saying? What could we do different? Did we hit the goal? Lots of things you can ask during that process. And here's what I'm going to tell you. If the actual event is where you are spending the majority of your time, you will not achieve the goal because you have not put enough effort into the beginning parts and the after parts of the event. Don't have the actual event time be where you spend the majority of your time. You've got to put the effort in before and after. Of course, we cannot forget about communication and promotion. It's an important part of the process for any events, but you need to talk about it. How's the message going to get out? Are there formal invitations? Is there general communication to large audiences, whether that's radio ads or I think there's still newspaper ads, local papers, invite cards. How often is that promotion going to happen? What's the timing? What's the frequency? When should we first do it? Does it start with a teaser? Do we build anticipation as we get closer? So you definitely have to think about that messaging. Attendance. What are we looking for? When you start thinking about an event, I'm going to guess you probably know roughly how many people you'd like to have. Now, sometimes that can be driven based off of the venue. If you have 500 seats, you want to fill all the seats. That's usually the goal. So how do I know when I'm doing that? Do I have registration? Are we selling tickets? Or is this just a come as you are, show up if it's a great day for you? Well, if that's your plan, what's your backup plan? Do you have overflow? Do you have another room where folks can watch via live streaming of what's happening in the main facility? So you have to think about those things when you think about your attendance, your numbers, and how you're going to manage that. So expectations. This is super important to your guests. Have you clearly explained the costs? Are there add-on options? Have they been outlined? Can you get the t-shirt, the coffee mug, the stuffed animal, whatever it is? Can you purchase additional food items? Is food going to be provided? And then follow up with folks. Again, how did you enjoy your time with us? Did this meet your expectations? What could we do better? You've got to ask the questions, and you've got to be willing to take the information in, even when it's not always what you want to hear, because that's how we grow and we improve and we change. So to summarize, and I'm hoping we're going to have a bunch of questions at the end of this. I just want you to think about your church event. It extends beyond the immediate outcomes. It can influence your attendees' spiritual journeys and their overall sense of community within the church. There are certain events that you can guarantee a non-church guest will be in attendance. A wedding, funeral, even a baptism. Almost always you're going to get some non-church guests in attendance for those. Community events that you're hosting. How do you want those guests to feel when they leave? You are there to serve them. So how are you going to serve them? You want your attendees to be inspired. I mean, we all want our attendees to strengthen their spiritual connection, or to at least reflect on their faith as a result of attending an event at your location. I want people to say, wow, I need to take a next step. What's my next step? And churches are great at providing next steps in faith journeys. Make sure it's available to your guests as they're leaving your facility, that they would know what a next step in their faith journey could look like with you. So at Cool Solutions, on our website, smartchurchsolutions.com, we've got a couple of resources that are available that we'd love to share. We have an ebook out there, 5 intentional steps to planning an event at your church facility. And we have a blog post that's a guide to hosting events in your facility. We'd love to encourage you to head out to our website and take a look for those free resources that are available. All right.
I just went ahead and shared one of those free ebooks in the chat for those that may be curious, the 5 intentional steps to planning an event. I also, somewhere we have a free event request form. I'll see if we have that somewhere.
We do.
If we want to give that away. Kim, I think we had one question come from Mary, and I actually would love to talk more on this topic too, if that's okay, but specifically
Sure.
related to renting out the church.
Right.
I think this
Yeah,
question,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this question in particular is about facilities on your website and what that process looks like. But would you mind just speaking a little more into rentals for a church holistically, Kim? I know you have a good bit of knowledge behind that. And Jim, I'm sure you do as well, because you guys do it quite a bit, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So here's the thing with renting out church facilities, and there's so many different mindsets from different church leaderships. You've been entrusted to be the best steward you can to these facilities. And you get to decide a little bit of what that looks like. When you have a lot of space and you've been blessed with that space and you know you can gift that through rentals, I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing. But you don't want to also gift things by not charging for space usage. And then now you're using costs to take care of a building that other people are using and maybe not doing as good of a job. So there's a balance that has to come into play. When you think about renting out your facility, think about what are the always costs. You're going to have some, based off your own church leadership, you're going to have some gotta haves. So at the church I worked at, our rule, we said there has to be one staff member on site for any outside organization. So right there, I've got a staffing cost. Now, can I offset that by also making that maybe someone who's already there during that time? Maybe I can. I also know I've got cleanup of big, I always pick on the kids, but kids, they make a mess. So if you're going to have the Pinewood Derby there and they're going to serve food and there's going to be stuff, you got to have a cost for that. How do you charge that back to folks that are renting your facility? It can be as super simple as letting them know what those costs are up front, and they can pick and choose which pieces they can add on, which pieces they can't add on based upon their budget. Can you do it systemically? Well, just so happens that Cool Solutions does have a billing and invoicing module to our event scheduler. I'll let Lee talk more about that, though.
Before we get too further in conversation, I want
Yes.
to welcome Jim in here too, because I know he's an expert on events. Jim, do you have any insight for kind of reflection to Kim's presentation or just general insight on what you're seeing in your role?
Yeah, and I'm by no means an expert. So in fact, I don't even do it. We have a person she's on the call. Well, she was trying to get on the call. Taylor, who's our event coordinator, full-time position. She's the one who plans all the events, and our facilities director works hand in hand with her for setups, takedown, cleanup, all that kind of stuff. And like you, Kim, because we're a downtown church, we have for any outside event that is not staff driven, we mandate that there has to be a front desk person who sits at the front doors, and a sexton on duty at all times while somebody's in the building, and we charge them for that time. And then depending if we're serving alcohol, our policy is that we have a constable on site if we're serving alcohol to outside entities. So there's also an expense for that gets passed on to the people who are renting facilities. Just be clear. I want to be clear that there's kind of two different people that you typically might rent space to, or three really. One is internal, which you typically don't charge your internal people because it's your own ministries. There may be occasions when you'd want to do that, but there's that. There's groups that are outside that you don't charge. For example, there might be AA groups or Al-Anon, or for example, Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, or Campfire Kids, whatever the groups are, that you may not want to charge. You just want them to use the space, and so those may not be charged. And then there's the groups that you would charge. For example, like our Candlelight Music Series, South by Southwest, quinceañera event, a wedding reception, not the ceremony, but the reception afterwards. Things like that are things that you would charge for, and that may include, like we do, kitchen services and meals and things like that. So when I agree with Kim, you have these most of us have at least more than the church building itself. But even the church building, for the most part, if you don't have things in your building, they sit empty for 6 days of the week, most of the time. So why not use those resources to not only your financial advantage, but also, as I said when I first made my introductory comments, is to be part of the community, the more that you invite people into your church, the more you're connected to community, the more people will think about, for example, St. David's when they think about a church to attend on Christmas or Easter or to be a member of. So that's really why we do it. Yeah, it's you're spot on about the need for planning. The preparation work is probably the biggest part of your time chunk in planning a thing. One is making sure that there's room on the calendar. Make sure the church doesn't have an event already on that day or some other thing going on. We use a software. I'll let Tim introduce what that is from Smart Church, but there's lots of them out there as well. But if you're going to open your church up to groups, you really need some type of place to keep track, some type of calendar to keep track of what's going on, because worst thing is to have double book events.
Right.
That's
right.
the worst way to get people not to come to your place.
Yeah. And I would tell you, if you are, whether you are considering for the first time, opening up your facility to external groups for usage, whether you're considering that for a price or just as something you want to offer, I would start, if you haven't already done this, by building what I call a building usage document, where you outline, this is what I expect if I'm going to allow someone into the building. This is what we're going to do for you, but this is what we expect in return. Because again, every one of our churches is going to be slightly different. The church I worked at, we had a no alcohol policy. So we didn't have too many wedding receptions. That was a deterrent for wedding receptions. But we had a lot of weddings. So you have to make sure you're going to have for your building some hard, no, this is never going to be allowed. And then you're going to have some, yes, you can do this, but here's the boundaries with which you can do it. And, then you'll have some things that are negotiable that you can always negotiate. But think that through as a leadership team and build that out before you start to plan to book events.
There's a couple of things in the chat. One am I going to address real quickly. Sorry to cut you off. One is for wedding receptions, is a staff person on site for the entire event. I would recommend a staff person be on site for any of your outside events, because if something were to go wrong, there's a fire, God forbid, the release, or toilet backs up, you need to have somebody there, in my opinion. We always have to have, like I said earlier, sexton has to be on duty and the receptionist has to be on duty. And we pass those charges on. The other thing that, go ahead.
Jim, I was just going to jump on that one. I would also make sure you are checking with whoever is providing your church insurance. There will be some different guidelines depending on who you're insured with about who needs to be present for events. So please do that due diligence as well.
Yeah, and a lot of times they'll actually have, I've been in different churches where your insurance, the P&L insurance, like wedding receptions, that requires the people renting to have a rider on their homeowners. And you might think, well, why do they need that? Weddings, there's nobody getting hurt at weddings. Here's the scenario they gave me. Everyone having a great wedding reception, there's line dance going on. Grandma gets up to do a line dance, falls, breaks a hip. Now you're on the hook. If the people having the event do not have a rider on their homeowners, where that becomes secondary, your insurance becomes primary, your insurance becomes secondary. So definitely talk to your insurance provider, your property and liability. That's very, very important.
And I was going to go back to a question we had earlier that I think I missed, Jim, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Mary asked, you have resources related to renting out your church facilities on your website. And I think this could actually tie into that pretty well, because some things to think about would be like the COIs. You need to collect certificates of insurance. Do you have a facility usage agreement that you want people to sign and acknowledge to certain agreements or terms? You need to collect deposits, all that kind of stuff. So there is a process that we need to go through of booking an event online, especially as going back to Jim's point, somebody outside of your staff. I'm biased, of course. We have a product called eSpace. It's called eSpace Event Management. I dropped a link to it in the chat somewhere, but it has a process for you to do that. It's called a public event request form, just embeds on your website, collects the request, does the real-time conflict detection for you and all that fun. But if you were to build it yourself, I would think of some type of form to collect the information that you require to determine if the event can be approved or not, contact information to reach back out to the person. And I highly consider the facility usage agreement early on and making sure people really understand and know that before they get far along in the event process. Sorry, Jim. I know I cut you off
there's also
there.
questions about long-term leases. We're really not getting into that too much here because this is really about events. But I would check with for our case in Diocese of Texas. Leases can be problematic from a tax point of view. But yeah, I would check with your diocesan office because it's really their property in most Episcopal dioceses. So, for example, we have an agreement with our Trinity Ministries, which is a resource center for the homeless here. They're a nonprofit under our nonprofit, so they're part of us. But diocese still had to sign off on the shared use agreement that we just finished with them. So I would check with your diocesan offices about leasing your long-term leases for your facilities. Certainly, if you think of long-term leases as in telecommunications towers or things like that, definitely talk to your diocesan office before you sign anything. But yeah, you can do long-term leases, especially for schools, preschools, things like that. I've seen happen where outside groups actually lease the building. But I would seek professional assistance from the diocese and or a property lawyer in your congregation if you could find one.
Yeah, and definitely make sure that you're building into that. If you decide to move forward with that, you build in a regular review process. Nothing worse than, having a 2-year agreement and you're, 6 months in and you just know it's not going to work. So definitely make sure you're, if you have the go ahead for that you're building regular check-ins into the process. But of course, your professionals you'll consult with are going to give you all of that information. I saw a question from Jim Mogensen about a timeline for that post kind of event activity and review. I get it. Everyone's pretty tired as the event is over. You've had all this time up front. You have the event. You have the endorphins going. You're done. Everybody's tired. You need to step away from it. I would tell you my best practice was to do the event recap within 2 weeks. And the reason I like to do the 2-week timeline is I found that people, if they were much further away from the event than that, they started to forget some of the fine details. And it's usually in the fine details where you find the opportunities. So 2 weeks was my personal best practice for that one.
Andy just had a question come in about advertising and attracting people for church-sponsored events. I happen to be a younger audience, so I might be able to help. Essentially, I would go where the younger audience are. If you're doing a lot of handwritten cards to addresses and postcards, you're probably not going to touch the younger audience. But if you go on Facebook, geographically finding out where they are in your community, in your area, just really nailing down, okay, we want to attract the younger audience, but who in the younger audience do we want to attract? And really nailing down what their interests are. If they're on Facebook and there's a popular TV show, something like that could even be pretty well received. But just going where they are, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the social medias really go a long way, especially like the groups within them and the communities. The local ones near you, like we have like a Facebook marketplace community near me. It's called Valentine Bargains, and it's a community of people who just do garage sales and stuff like that within a 30-mile radius of Charlotte, North Carolina. And just that little group, even though it's for marketplacing, you can start promoting events and lots of things there, and they get really good traction, especially by like my generation. So something to look for sure.
Yeah, the other place, I would agree that social media is the best place to reach. Not even young people like Lee, but old people like me. Even though I'm not on social media, but other people like me are on social media, and so even if you're trying to get a across the board age, social media is still a good place to go. Facebook, like you said, Twitter or X, but I can tell you that if you're having something like homeless ministry, trying to advertise that, Generation X and the 20s, like my own kids, they want to do things for something. They just don't want to do it for the sake of showing up and doing it. But if you're doing an activity that's going to help somebody else, they're all in and they'll do it. So the other place is, as Lee said, there's Nextdoor app. You could join that as a church and advertise on that, which is, all the you can choose the neighborhoods around you, that type of thing. That's what they call the neighborhood Facebook. That's what I call it. But all those type things are good. You just kind of have to, if you can think of a way to communicate that way, because the more ways you reach out to people, the more people you're going to reach.
Yeah. And think about too, the folks that are part of your congregation that are in that generation right now. Even if you have a smaller number of that generation, talk to them. Where are they going? Where did they see information? They are a wealth of knowledge, and you cannot go wrong with the good old-fashioned bulletin boards that are in a lot of coffee shops now, whether that's the chain coffee shop or the local coffee shop. They want to get information about what's happening in the community out there. So, follow their guidelines they post and put stuff up out there.
Yeah, and there also may be like, the old-fashioned local newspaper. We have one here in Austin called Community Impact, and you can throw stuff in there, or you can call them and say, we're having this big event. Can you send a reporter out, or can we send pictures and write our own little article for it? They usually are dying for community events because it's a community publication, and I'm sure there's other ones like that in most other cities as well. So that's real great. Just real quick, you can please stay on if you can, but I see people are starting to log off. I did put in the chat the link. I'll put it on again, but there is this recording will be available tomorrow. If you have registered for it, which you probably have since you're here, you'll get an email link to it. You can also go to the episcopalparishes.org and go on to this recording, as well as lots of other past webinars that we've had on many, many different topics. And I also just want to encourage people to attend the 39th annual conference of the Episcopal Parish Networks. It's in Houston this year. It's from March 6th to 9th. And early registration is now open, so it's a little bit cheaper if you register before the end of the year. And again, you can do that at episcopalparishes.org and go to the link for the 2024 conference. I know from the administrative standpoint, and I was on the steering committee, or am on the steering committee. There's a lot of great workshops happening. For administrators, we're having a wonderful pre-conference session on church security by somebody who's written a book on it. So a lot of exciting things at this year's conference in March. So I encourage everybody to attend, and it's well worth the money, not only for the information you receive, but the networking that you build. So just a plug in for that. And so I just want to get that in before everybody heads out. I will put the link for this recording in the chat again, so in case you missed it.
Awesome.
That's great. I really, I thank everyone for their time today. It was really great to be able to share a little bit about impactful church events with you all. And you had some great questions. I'm trying to answer a couple additional ones here in the chat itself, so I can get them in there.
I'll just add too, for our big events, like for example, like South by Southwest, or if you have something like like a for-profit group coming in and you're going to sign a contract, I always encourage you, unless you are one, to let an attorney look at it. The
Yes.
chancellor, we use the chancellor of our church. If you don't have one of those, there's got to be a lawyer in your church somewhere, and they'll usually just can just review it and say, you know, you want to take this out, or your insurance company may provide that service. When I worked in another state, our insurance company provided that service with their attorneys. So I can tell you already, they're going to tell you to take out indemnity clauses, because none of them like that, because you don't want to be held responsible for other people's problems. So but just FYI, if you're going to sign a legal contract with somebody, make sure somebody who has legal knowledge, preferably an attorney, looks over it.
Yeah, and that applies when you don't always think about it. I've hosted plenty of Christian concerts, and you know, we all like to think that we're all in the same boat, and you still need to make sure you're being a good steward of your facility, and you're having those attorneys, accountants, whoever, take a look at those documents.
Yeah, we had a Christian group from out of state rent our place one year for one of their events, and we ended up threatening to take them to court because they refused to pay part of it, because they said they didn't ask for that, whatever, they changed their mind, trying to get out of paying for it. So it doesn't matter who it is. The Pope might want to rent your facilities, but I would definitely read the contract for that one. And I'm
Have a really
Catholic.
good security team as well. Oh my goodness. But I did see some questions around, you know, just wanting to have hospitality as a ministry and maybe not associating charges. And if that's what's right for your church, for your organization, then you just need to establish the directives, what has to be in place, are you willing to you know, do without, particularly with small staffs. And does your insurance company support that? And just make the best decision that you can.
Exactly. Looking to see if there's any other questions we missed. Is there a way to save the chat? Yeah, I think the chat will be saved. I'll save it, but I think it's saved in the recording, I believe. So we can do that. One person said, after action reviews, Google asking for what went well, what could be done differently next time? I guess that's just a comment, not a question. But yes, that's the question. Some of the questions you need to ask is what went well, what didn't go well, and what could be done differently next time to make it better.
Yeah.
So those are the questions you need to ask.
Go back to your goal. Did you hit your goal?
Yep.
Did you hit the goal? But also ask, was there another benefit you hadn't realized? That's another question. Sometimes it happens.
And make sure when you review that you actually have all the people in the room that need to be there. Don't forget to ask the sexton that worked that one. Invite the volunteers that may have helped, because they're going to have a different perspective. The sexton would say, this group was a mess. It took me 5 hours to clean up after them. Either I need more sextons, or you need to have, you know, something else to have it done. So it's good to hear from people that were in the trenches, so to speak, for the event.
Yes, absolutely. Good point.
All right. Well, it's coming up on 3 o'clock. I don't see any more chats. I see a lot of thank yous. Kim, I will extend my thank you to you and Lee for willing to be part of this webinar, and Kim for imparting all your great knowledge. Really appreciate it. And thank all of you so much for participating, for spending an hour with us on this Monday afternoon. I'm sure you have a lot of work to do like I do every Monday. So I really do appreciate you coming, taking the time out, being with us. Hopefully it was helpful to you. If you'd like to see more things like this, please reach out to EPN, to Joe Swimmer, or even myself, and we'll see what we can do. We're always looking for topics that are of interest to people, or maybe like a second layer of the events. This is kind of introductory level, maybe something more elaborate. So if you would like to know more about eSpace, I'll just put a plug in for him. We use eSpace at St. David's. It's a great marketing or calendaring tool, and we're a large place with 4 entities in our building using it: Trinity Center, our day school, the church, and our hospitality, which is a commercial kitchen that we host Thursday lunches, Sunday breakfast, and Wednesday dinners. So We use it constantly, and we use it for for registration and coordinating everybody, facilities all the way through. So just a plug in for you guys for that.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks,
You're very
Jim.
welcome. Again, thank you very much. Recording will be available tomorrow. If you go to EPN, it will also be emailed. The link will be emailed to you. And we appreciate you coming on board.
All right.
Thank you so
Well,
much,
thank you
all.
everybody.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.